Today we're ranking every card in Clash Royale from worst to best, starting off with the Barbarian Hut. This thing is absolutely terrible, and it remains, although it's a fan favorite, at the bottom of the list for the third consecutive month. At 117, the Furnace. This thing is very marginally better than the Barbarian Hut. Very marginally. Next up is the Clone. The last time the Clone got value, Obama was in office. Next up is Battle Healer. This thing used to be good in E-Golem. It has been completely abandoned by E-Golem, and I think I've faced it once in the last 2.5 months. At 114, the Minion Horde. This thing is a walking negative elixir trade and dies to arrows, and arrows is everywhere, and dies to Firecracker, and Firecrackers everywhere. You get the point. The Void. It got nerfed into the ground and barely serves any purpose. Why would I use this over Fireball, Arrows, Log, Zap, Snowball, literally every other spell in the game? The Goblin Hut. A little bit better than its spawner friends because the Spear Goblins are better than the Fire Spirits and Barbarians. At 111, the Mirror. It's very fun to use sometimes, but is a complete waste of elixir and oftentimes just hogs up a deck slot. Suspicious Bush. Everybody picks this in draft for some reason, and you know what? Keep picking it in draft. I don't know why. It's garbage. Skeleton Army. This thing is a walking negative elixir trade similar to the Minion Horde, except it's cheaper, so you usually can squeeze value out of it sometimes, but you're just doing yourself a disservice if you use this instead of literally any other swarm card in the game. Rascals. Now, they would jump up 70 spots maybe if the Rascal Girls didn't die to Log, but you're essentially always paying 5 elixir for a crappier, fatter version of the Knight with less damage. Heal Spirit. 1 out of every 132 times you play it, it will heal up your E-Barbs and they will get 1 more hit. Also, I have a picture of the Heal Spirit in a bikini. The Ice Golem. Just because it's in 2.6 doesn't mean it's useful anywhere else. The Normal Mortar. Nobody ever does anything with this. Every single mortar player in the game uses the Evolved Mortar. So since we're not ranking evolutions, then the Normal Mortar just really sucks. Archers. They die to arrows instantly and are outclassed by every other ranged support card in the game. The Sparky. It's expensive, it's slow, it barely ever actually gets value, and it's distracted really easily. The Freeze. If you really don't expect your Lumberloon opponent to be running Freeze, that's on you. The Mother Witch is outclassed by every single ranged support troop in the game that aren't called the Archers, and is unfortunately, or fortunately if you're a Graveyard player, fell off the face of the earth. The Bomb Tower. The Bomb Tower is outclassed by every single other building. You're beginning to see a trend in these lower tier cards. The Cannon is better, the Tesla is better, barely, the Inferno Tower is better, the Cage is better, the Bomb Tower, just, you don't need Splash. You have a Log and you have a Cannon. You don't need the Bomb Tower's crappy DPS. Although the Goblin Curse is fun, it's also really bad, and you usually always need to pair it with another spell in order for it to actually get value, and a lot of the time it's just a niche funny card that never gets value. But the one... It is pretty fun when you do get it on the tower. Golden Knight. The card is absolute buns, but the E-Giant players will not let go of the Golden Knight, so it moves up a couple ranks because E-Giant moved up a couple ranks. The standard Battle Ram is butt cheeks, and nobody on top ladder uses the standard Battle Ram. They all use the Evo Battle Ram because the Evo Battle Ram is alright, and the normal Battle Ram is just like, nobody uses it because you'd always just use the evolution ranking. It's kind of hard to rank the cards that aren't their evolution variant. The standard Battle Ram sucks. The Evo Battle Ram, very good. Goblin Demolisher, unfortunately, if he's not broken, then he won't be used because he's a 4 elixir bomber. Why would I use a 4 elixir bomber when I could use a 2 elixir bomber? Unfortunately, the standard version of the Cage is also pretty mid. The Diddy Cage is reasonably good. The normal Cage is practically useless, and nobody would use this over another, you know, Cannon, Tesla, iTower, etc. Speaking of the Tesla, the Cannon is better than this thing in very many ways, including damage, DPS, elixir cost, versatility, and although the Tesla hits air, whatever, it doesn't make it a good card. The Tesla's use rates are at an all-time low. Fire Spirit got a buff. Unfortunately, it sits at the bottom of the list because the Fire Spirit is not as good as the Ice Spirit. The Ice Spirit will still reign supreme in every other circumstance other than, I can't name a single circumstance. The standard wall breakers are also pretty buns. Anybody that's using wall breakers, almost anybody that's using wall breakers outside of recruits players, will be using the evolved version because the evolved version can be used on defense and is also dealing more damage, so the normal wall breakers just kind of stink. The barbarians sit in the same place as the wall breakers. The Evo version is getting better and has seen an uptick in use rate. Everybody that's using barbs uses the Evo. The standard barbs will never be used. Unfortunately, one of Clash Royale's most interesting cards remains at the bottom of the list because of the fact that he's just too thick. He costs too much elixir. He's too much of an awkward card. Like, you get some value out of him sometimes by deflecting spells, but when you have a monk, nobody ever plays a spell into the monk, so it really doesn't get that much value ever. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the elixir collector has gotten better. Not by much, but it is better and more usable now in Golem, in Three Musketeer, in Bridge Spam. I'm not really sure why, because it usually always nets negative return and is wasted, so it's not that good, but it got a little better. The wizard. The normal wizard is very bad and will almost never get value, but the Evo wizard will get value because he doesn't die as easily, which is the wizard's problem. So you see a common trend again where the Evo version is really good or just good and the normal card just sucks. The Zappies are slightly better than the wizard because of Fireball Bait, and if you play them correctly, you stun lock cards that like really pisses people off. And I mean, they're good in recruits, and recruits is good, so I mean, that's better than the wizard. Doesn't have a single meta deck it's used in. So elite barbarians. The elite barbarians are used in one goblin giant deck in everybody's favorite mid ladder menace card, and can be used to apply decently good pressure sometimes. So they're not the worst card in the game. They're actually not even bottom 20, so WE Barbs. In case you're new to Clash Royale, the Little Prince used to be the best card in the game not even too long ago, and had 7 nerfs and is now complete garbage and is like probably one of the worst champions in the game. Very arguably bottom 2. Giant Skeleton. You know what? I moved it up a little bit because it has seen a very marginal uptick in use rate on top ladder, but the Giant Skeleton is... it's irrelevant on top ladder, really, and it's just good in mid ladder a lot of the time, and in lower ladder because people can overcommit to other things and give the Giant Skeleton a lot of value, so it's decent. No, it's not decent, it's bad, but it's better than the other bad cards. Tombstone is actually a very good mid-ladder counter, which is weird, but it is, because people don't really know how to deal with Tombstone, and a lot of the time they overcommit to actually deal with the Tombstone, so by playing it, you get an automatic positive elixir value, which is good enough for me. Minions. Minions are unfortunately plagued by the fate of the archers, where they just die to arrows usually, but since they're flying, they're a bit harder to kill, and sometimes, very rarely, will get value. The fact that they die to pretty much every splash card in the game, and a bunch of splash cards got buffed, makes the minions pretty irrelevant. I wouldn't recommend using them over another thick air card. The Berserker. Well, hey, at least it's not the worst card in the game. I guess that's a good job, Supercell, for not making the new card the worst card or the best card. So, yay. Inferno Tower. Now, this one's better than a few of the building counterparts we've gone over, because when it gets value, it gets really good value, but when it doesn't get value, it is a walking elixir drain, and you just spent 5 elixir to fail to kill bats. The Goblin Giant. How on earth is the Goblin Giant? There's not a single normal Goblin Giant in the top 200. Every single person using them uses the evolved version. The normal Goblin Giant is not even worth using because, again, it's so hard to rank these if separate from the Evo. The normal Goblin Giant stinks. The evolved Goblin Giant is a rather good win condition, one of the best in the game. The Goblin Drill, which evolution isn't like insane. It's not a very good evolution most of the time, and Drill's kind of rubbish in the meta. So, I mean, Drill's kind of low on the list. It's not that great in the meta, and it's fine without its Evo, so whatever. It's down low. Would you believe this? There are more Three Musketeers in the top 200 right now than Goblin Drills, which is kind of ridiculous, but Three Musketeers are... I mean, the Musketeer just got a buff, and I don't know why else they would be anywhere decent. I wouldn't recommend getting all excited and playing Three Musketeers, but they are usable. Executioner. I know a lot of mid-ladder players get value out of their Executioner. Unfortunately, it still remains too expensive and too inconsistent to be used in top-ladder play competitively and consistently, so it doesn't rank nearly as high as some of its other counterparts. At 75, base Royal Recruits. The Evo Royal Recruits are good. The base Royal Recruits are kind of mid. You'll never see somebody use recruits without the Evo version, which is, again, why all these standard base version of the Evos are down here, and the Evos are much better. The Dead Horse is being beaten. The E-Drag, the normal version of the card, is not good. It just isn't. The Evo version is probably a top 3 Evo in the game and made it very viable. And the normal E-Drag is just not really worth using. And nobody uses it without the Evo. Expo. Now, Expo is in the right hands a solid win condition. It is still being countered by a lot of things in the meta right now, And the fact that you can outplay a lot of decks with Expo is what nets it higher than some other win conditions on this list, but it's still not a very consistent card. It gets hard countered by a lot of things right now. Bats. The non-Evo version of the bats are very mid and die to like literally everything, and normal people don't put bats in their deck, but cycle addicts love bats, and bait players love, like bait players who run arrows bait and stuff love Evo bats. So normal bats are just whatever. Royal Delivery. This is a spell that's used in one deck, Royal Hogs. I think it's much better than a lot of people give it credit for, but also nobody ever uses it because it does have 0 offensive value. So a lot of the time you could just use a spell that has offensive value. Even though the delivery is a pretty good card, it's outclassed by a lot of other spells. The Skeleton King, which is an interesting card because it's not amazing, but it's also not terrible. So it's kind of like almost in the middle of the pack. But the Skeleton King gets a lot of value sometimes and gets literally no value other times. So he lands at mid-rank. At 69, we've got the nice old Skeleton Barrel, who is actually used as a pretty popular secondary win condition in several decks like Mega Knight and like some certain log bait decks and other decks that I'm completely forgetting off the top of my head right now. But Skeleton Barrel is better than a lot of people give it credit for. Dark Prince, the Valkyrie is better, the Knight is better, the Goblinstein Monster is better, the Royal Ghost is better. It's just that he needs a charge time buff. Give the Dark Prince the buff you gave to the Prince, he'll be much better and much more used. Goblin Machine! The non-Evo version of the Zap is pretty mid. That it's okay. Nobody really uses it without the Evo. You'd rather use Snowball in a lot of circumstances, which is why it ranks barely above the Zap, but you'd rather use, if you're not using the Evo Zap, you're using a log. So Elixir Golem, it's not a bad win condition. Well, it kind of is. You have impossible matchups and you have impossible for your opponent matchups. So if you like playing coin flip games, the Golem is for you. The Snowball. Now, although the Evo Snowball is not very good, the normal Snowball is better than the normal Zap. Evo Zap is miles better than the normal Snowball, but the Snowball does more than the normal, like a Zap does, which makes it better. The base Valkyrie is alright, it's solid. Again, pretty much everybody that uses the Valkyrie uses the Evo version. I can't name a single deck where a normal Valkyrie is used instead of the Evo version. So, Electro Spirit is decent because it chains and can hit things that normal spirits can't. Ice Spirit is better in almost every other deck. The E-Spirit is good in RG. That's like it. Maybe some Expo decks too. Electro Wizard could probably use a buff, but is a fairly decent, usable, viable, mid-range support troop. The Witch, after her splash buff, has gotten miles better, and the Witch is still not amazing in top ladder, but has increased versatility in every other range of the game, so lands at 60. The Bandit. Now, the Bandit has gotten a lot worse recently, but is still a viable bridge spam card and usable in pretty much nothing else than bridge spam. So if you're a bridge spam user, hooray, the Bandit's really good. If you're not, Night Witch. Now a lot of this is due to her win conditions that she's normally paired with not being very good right now, but the Night Witch as a card is still decent. It's just if her E-Golem and Golem buddies aren't very good, then she's not going to be very good. Mini P.E.K.K.A. It's pretty solid, does a lot of damage, is oftentimes not going to be your go-to because a lot of times you would rather have a mini tank instead of a like hybrid, but Mini P.E.K.K.A. is alright. Barbarian Barrel. This one is probably lower than a lot of pros would put it, but the versatility in areas other than top ladder is like 0. Most of the time you would always rather have a log. Although it's popular in a few other decks on top ladder, and it's not a, it's pretty popular. It's one of the top 15 most popular cards on top ladder. It's still not good anywhere else really. You'd rather have a log. The Evo Lumberjack is amazing. The base Lumberjack is good. I mean, are we at the good range yet? I don't know if we're at the good range yet, but the Lumberjack will fairly often get a lot of value. Has probably dropped in ranks because the Evo is really good, so most people will use it with the Evo, but the normal Lumberjack is still decent, so. Rocket is used in a lot of top ladder decks for tower damage and just for versatility. Rocket's actually a pretty decent card. It's hard to use, which is probably why it's not ranked higher, and a lot of people will rather have Fireball, Poison, Lightning, other things in their decks because Rocket oftentimes won't get a lot of value, so there's a reason it's a tier below the normal spells you'll see, but it's still a good, decent option. The Golem is a solid win condition. It has gotten a little bit better than it's been in the past couple of months. Golem is still not the greatest in the meta, but ever since the shift away from Goblinstein, which is not a big shift, but a small shift away from Goblinstein, it's getting better. Goblin Barrel is okay. I think we're at the good range now. Goblin Barrel is decent to good. The problem is, without its Evo, it kind of falls off a little bit. The need is the Goblin Barrel by itself really sucks. The Goblin Barrel paired with a very good bait deck makes the Goblin Barrel better, but it's still, as a card by itself, really easy to counter. Mega Knight is very polarizing. It's also easy to counter if you know what you're doing, but so many people don't know what they're doing that the Mega Knight is a very solid, pretty good card in almost all of Clash Royale until you get up to like that really high ranks. Royal Giant is a solid win condition. It's pretty good, better than a lot of win conditions out there, but it is definitely hard to play in the current meta, which makes it a significant step behind a lot of the best win conditions in the game right now. The Flying Machine can either be the most annoying card you've ever dealt with or useless. And when it's the most annoying card ever, it's really good, and when it's useless, it's like you don't even have it in your deck. The Rune Giant completely carries a lot of cards right now and is a win condition by itself because it buffs up things like the eye drag, and it is, you know, no longer an S tier card. It had like a 1 week Linsanity run, but the Rune Giant is a solid option right now. It buffs up a lot of cards, and a lot of people are underrating her. The E-Giant has seen a massive return to the meta, and though it is still mid and probably not the best option to level up right now, it is much better, and it is much easier to outplay a lot of players right now. The Ram Rider fell off from being an S tier win condition, but the Ram Rider over time has gone from here to here to here. Ram Rider is okay. Ram Rider gets good value a lot of the time. Her buffs or her nerfs were definitely necessary, and she's not insanely oppressive anymore. The P.E.K.K.A. has received several big nerfs, including nerfs to its evolution that make it just not that viable anymore, although the P.E.K.K.A. will still get consistent value in a lot of decks on lower ladder. P.E.K.K.A.'s fallen off on top ladder, which makes it, you know, brought down to the top 46. Mega Minion does solid damage for a very nice elixir cost. The problem is there's not really that much of a problem. There's a limit to what the Mega Minion can do, and its offensive value is next to 0, which means it's really capped at like how good it can really be. If it on offense it doesn't do anything. Musketeer is basically the same thing as Mega Minion, except it's a little better on defense and a little better on offense, which makes it a little better than the Mega Minion. But the Musketeer is, it's kind of outclassed by some other ranged support troops right now. The Knight, good stats for the cost. The Knight is good. The Knight is not going to do anything crazy for you, but is never going to let you down and will always get value, so that's why the Knight is a pretty solid option as a mini tank, one of the best. Magic Archer is back, baby. Magic Archer Tornado all the way back, especially when paired with the current minor decks in the meta. Whew, Magic Archer is all the way back, dude, and it is pesky. I think Magic Archer is better than the Hunter, but the Hunter will oftentimes on lower ladder get you so much more value than the Magic Archer will. There's a higher skill ceiling with the Magic Archer. It's easier to use the Hunter, but the Magic Archer, it's difficult. The Magic Archer is way better on top ladder. Hunter is way better everywhere else. So you do what you want with that ranking. Bowler is a strong, consistent damage dealing mini tank that is kind of awkward because he's expensive and doesn't have the best versatility in the world. So it's good. It's a Bowler's good. It's just a little weird. And that's not because he's purple. Okay. Spear Goblins. They'll never let you down because they're 2 elixirs. You can't let them let you down because they're 2 elixir. But the Spear Goblins get good value. They're cheap. They're easy to bait with. And they will oftentimes get good pressure and good chip damage no matter where you're using them. The Stab Goblins are probably a little bit better than the Spear Goblins because they are a better distraction card, do more damage, and are a little bit more versatile than the Spear Goblins. Princess is a win condition. Princess the Bridge with bait is a win condition. Also, it's used nowhere else. So this is really weird, but the Princess is a good solid card, and at the bridge with bait is just really, really oppressive. Also, the fact that Evo Dark Goblin got buffed, or is a thing, got added to the game, makes the Princess a lot better too. Maybe people would rank the Firecracker lower, but I think just because this is like the most popular card in the game, it's popular for a reason. It's easy to use, always gets value, dies to arrows, sure, but you can use outcycling to get past that. And it's just a very solid, consistent card that fits in almost every deck in the game. You can't go wrong with the 1 elixir skeletons, but they're also 1 elixir skeletons. So how high can you really put them on this list? I mean, they're good. Everybody loves the skeletons. They're great in cycle. They're a staple in cycle, and that's about it. Cannon Cart has definitely fallen off from when it was an S tier card, but is still very, very strong and is oppressive and good on defense. Baby Dragon's buff was amazing because the card is not oppressive, but is very consistently getting good splash damage and being a good role as a support troop, which makes it, you know, not as good as maybe the Skeleton Dragons because of its lack of damage, but still a very solid card. Good option to put in any deck. Earthquake is held back by the fact that it's only able to be used in a couple of decks. Earthquake doesn't really have synergy with a lot of win conditions, but the win conditions like Royal Hogs and Hog Rider that it does have like synergy with, it's really, really good. The Mighty Miner is extremely good right now. Got a massive buff that makes it way, way more usable and can fit in a ton of different decks. Although it's not the extreme top ladder favorite right now, seen an uptick in use rate, and you can win entire games by playing the Mighty Miner properly. Lava Hound is definitely hurting right now due to the Royal Chef nerf and the Lava Pup nerf, but still Lava is remaining one of the best win conditions in the game. Very strong, very versatile, and a great option for new players to pick up. Royal Ghost has a very good offensive presence, is a very dangerous threat in multiple decks, and is pretty solid as a defensive card as well, though sometimes it likes to spaz out on skeletons. The Phoenix gets consistent value and respawns a lot of the time and does death damage and is versatile and does good damage and is cute and makes nice sound effects. The Poison is probably the worst of the 4 big spells. I don't know if you want to count arrows, but the Poison is good. It's just a little bit niche because it does damage too slowly. Lightning is necessary to kill Goblin Steins and Evo E-Drags, but both of those cards have seen a slight decrease in use rate, so the Lightning is a little bit worse, and the Lightning is a very expensive commitment, so it doesn't fit in certain decks, but the Lightning is still fairly good. The base Dart Goblin is still good, even though the Evo version is much better. It gets consistent offensive value, is very, very annoying, great on defense, and great on offense. The Graveyard has seen a massive uptick in use rate right now, especially due to a lot of Cannoneers and Dagger Duchesses being bad against the Graveyard in certain situations, so Graveyard and Giant Graveyard and Splash Yard has seen a big uptick in win percent and use rate. Inferno Dragon is a great tank killer, is really easy to use, and fits in quite a few decks, and completely wins you matchups against certain types of decks that might not have the best answers to it. Bomber is a very good, even without its evolution, very, very strong damage dealer for 2 elixir, swarm counterer, prevents you from getting 3 crowned and looking like a fool card that is just very versatile and is used by a lot of players. The Giant has gotten insanely better. Giant Double Prince is officially back and dominating the meta right now, and Giant Graveyard is also good as well. So Giant is a must-use win condition right now and is reflected by the use rate and win rate in the top 200. The Skeleton Dragons, arguably one of the best, if not the best support troop in the game, do insane damage, fireball baits, and are very versatile for a, very low downside. The downside is maybe they don't splash things and they have a hissy fit with minion hordes. Everybody has taken a Prince charge of 1 HP, and everybody knows how hard it can be to deal with Princes when you're down elixir, and Prince is just very oppressive and very solid in the current meta, especially with Giant. Giant and Prince very closely tied together. If one is good, the other is probably good as well. The Miner will probably never leave the top 20. Very versatile, very good secondary win condition, good at sniping air counters. It's the Miner, man. The Ice Spirit gets consistent value always, is a cycle in staple in cycle decks. It's getting late and is just very consistent, very good. You'll see it being used over every single other spirit in pretty much every single scenario. The Fisherman, probably not a top 10 card anymore, but is still very good after the nerf and remains versatile in a ton of decks. Is probably seeing a downtick in use rate because it's not using the broken Goblin Giant deck anymore, but Fisherman is always going to be good to use. Cannon, even as a base version, the best building in the game by far. Tons of damage, is cheap, is easy to cycle, and just, oh my god, I love the Cannon, bro. It does so much damage and is miles better and cheaper than every other building in the game. The Balloon is a very strong and oppressive win condition that is very, very good in multiple decks, including Lumberloon, Lava Loon, Loon Cycle, your mid-ladder Menace deck, and is honestly probably one of the most versatile win conditions in the entire game. Royal Hogs are really only used in 1 or 2 decks, but are insanely strong in the 1 or 2 decks they're used in. Royal Hogs is one of the best decks for new players to pick up. It's just really good in the current meta, and you can outplay so many different decks with the best Royal Hogs deck in the game right now. I actually just made a video on them recently. Hog Rider and Royal Hogs are neck and neck right now. One is being used one more time in the top 200 than the other. The Hog Rider is a bit better, a bit easier to use, a bit more versatile, and is probably a bit easier to upgrade in certain decks because you don't really need a champion. So Hog Rider just edges out the Royal Hogs. Rage is amazing and has even gotten better because of the Lumberjack Evo needing Rage to, it's kind of fell off a little bit because Rage is no longer needed to buff the extra Lumberjack, if you know what I'm saying. But the Rage does damage, is a very viable option ever since it's been able to do damage and turns complete games around. The Ice Wizard is insanely strong, dude. This thing is oppressive ever since it's got its buff. It's been a top 15 card since. Does crazy defensive value, doesn't even need to be paired with Tornado anymore, and dude, the Ice Wizard, if you don't put it in your deck, you're missing out, dude. The Archer Queen is really, really good because it provides so much damage, and you can get out of jail free by just hitting that ability, and is really honestly pretty versatile, can be used as your support troop in a lot of decks. If you have it, or if you don't have it, or if you have just a support troop role, try replacing your role with the Queen, and you'll see how much value you get. Fireball is one of the most used spells in the game right now, is very good because we're not as much of a lightning value, like lightning spell bait meta right now. Goblinstein and E-Drag a little bit fell off, so Fireball has back in the meta, getting consistent value once again. Goblinstein remains one of the strongest cards in the game, also one of the most used, but has gotten worse with its nerfs. But I mean, it's still top 6 in the game, so how worse has it really gotten? I'd still recommend upgrading it because it's still ridiculously oppressive and easy to use. The guards are a top 5 card in the game. The guards are really, really hard to kill and will always get you defensive value because they're really hard to kill, and will usually get you offensive value because they're really hard to kill, and are good against, they're godsend against Cannoneer, really good against Dagger Duchess. They're just very oppressive, good on offense, good on defense, and fit in almost any deck in the game. The Goblin Gang is a little bit better. It just is. It's a little bit more versatile. It's a little bit better of a distraction unit in certain circumstances because it can spell bait, which makes it better in a bunch of bait decks, because the guards you can't kill with spells like that, so they don't provide spell bait. The Goblin Gang does, which makes them a little bit better than the guards. The Tornado is ridiculously oppressive, everybody knows this, extremely versatile, bails you out of entire circumstances, and is just a must and need for a ton of decks to be able to synergize with. The Tornado is amazing, probably the single best card to build your deck around in 2025. The arrows are coming in at number 2 because arrows are extremely versatile and are able to kill so many of the bait metas that are going on right now. There's bait everywhere you turn, there's bait, so arrows are almost a must-have in almost every deck in the game that doesn't already have really good bait answers, so arrows are number 2. And the best card in Clash Royale is of course the log. The unmatched versatility, depth, and girth, the versatility, the power, the knockback, just the damage. It's just amazing. The log is amazing.